The mind is like a vast and fertile garden, and every thought that passes through it is a seed with the potential to take root and grow. Most people underestimate the power of a single thought. But just as one seed of a towering tree can one day shade an entire field, one thought has the power to influence the entire direction of a life. Every moment, we are scattering seeds in this mental garden, whether consciously or unconsciously. If these seeds are left unattended, weeds inevitably spring forth. Doubts, fears, resentments, and anxieties grow wild when the gardener is absent, and over time they choke out the possibility of a beautiful harvest. But when a person becomes intentional, when one deliberately chooses the type of seeds planted, the mind begins to bring forth order, harmony, and abundance. This is what it means to discipline thought, to no longer let the soil of the imagination be wasted on what destroys, but to cultivate what uplifts and builds. Imagine a farmer who leaves his field untended for a season. Weeds will take over, pests will spread, and the land will bring forth chaos instead of fruit. In the same way, when we neglect our inner life, destructive thought patterns grow unchecked. What we see on the outside in circumstances and events is nothing more than the crop we allowed to grow on the inside. A person cannot hope to live in peace while permitting constant turmoil in thought. One cannot expect success while entertaining 1,000 invisible doubts that quietly gnaw at the roots of confidence. The harvest is inevitable, for thought is never idle. It is always creating, always producing, always shaping the invisible into the visible. Therefore, if one wishes to change the harvest, one must begin by examining the seeds being sown. This is why discipline is not about suppression but about selection. It is not about forcing the mind into silence, but guiding it into order. The gardener does not fight with weeds endlessly. He removes them and plants the right seed in their place. The discipline of thought is the same. When a negative or unworthy idea arises, it is noticed, pulled up, and replaced with one that leads to growth. Over time, as this practice continues, the garden of the mind flourishes, producing beauty, peace, and abundance without constant struggle. The harvest becomes automatic because the soil has been trained to nurture only what serves life. To understand the mind as a garden is to recognize both the danger of neglect and the incredible power of intentional cultivation. Yet this work begins with a deeper step, and that is awareness. A gardener must know what is growing in his field before he can tend to it. He must notice the weeds in order to remove them. In the same way, a person cannot change what they are unwilling to see. Many live their entire lives unaware of the thoughts that dominate their inner world. They wonder why life seems filled with recurring problems, why the same patterns return again and again, without realizing that their habitual thinking is the invisible author of those patterns. Awareness is the first discipline, for without it the mind is a wild field growing whatever it pleases. The act of becoming aware is simple, but it requires courage. It asks you to become the observer of your own mind, to step back and watch the stream of thoughts that arise throughout the day. Instead of being swept away by every passing worry, you begin to notice the worry itself. Instead of being consumed by anger, you notice the story that fuels the anger. This noticing is not judgment. It is clarity. It is the light that shines into the hidden corners of consciousness and reveals what has been silently shaping your world. You may find, in those first moments of awareness, that your inner dialogue is filled with more doubt, fear, or criticism than you imagined. This realization is not failure, but the beginning of freedom. For once you see, you can choose. Awareness is like turning on the light in a room that has been dark for years. At first, the dust and clutter may be unsettling, but without the light, you could never clean it. The discipline of thought does not begin by forcefully changing everything at once. It begins by simply watching. Spend a day listening to your own mind. Notice the tone of your inner voice. Observe the stories you repeat to yourself about who you are and what life is. These stories may seem small, but they are the very seeds from which your outer life grows. You cannot discipline a thought that you refuse to recognize, and you cannot replace a belief that you refuse to admit is there. This is why awareness is a practice. The more you notice, the more you uncover. It is easy to assume that you are in control of your thinking, but awareness reveals how much of it is habitual, automatic, and deeply ingrained. Most people think the same thoughts day after day, like grooves carved into the mind. Awareness allows you to step out of the groove and ask, is this thought worthy of me? Does it lead me toward what I desire? Does it align with the life I want to live? Without this practice, the mind remains on autopilot, repeating yesterday's stories and producing tomorrow's results. As awareness deepens, something remarkable happens. You begin to feel the space between thought and response. Instead of being instantly carried away by every idea, you see the thought arise and then choose what to do with it. This is the beginning of mastery. A negative thought may still appear, but it no longer rules you. You have the power to accept it, reject it, or replace it. And with each moment of awareness, your ability to select the higher thought grows stronger. Awareness is not about emptying the mind of all thoughts, but about taking back the authority to decide which thoughts are worthy of your attention. The garden of the mind cannot thrive without this awareness, because without noticing, weeds spread unchecked. Awareness is the discipline that holds up the mirror, showing you what is truly there. And once you see, you can begin the work of selection, replacement, and cultivation. The power lies not in fighting thoughts, but in recognizing them and redirecting them. In this way, awareness becomes the foundation of all inner transformation, for it is the discipline that makes every other discipline possible. Every thought you allow to linger in your mind gains strength. It is like adding fuel to a flame. The more attention you give it, the brighter and stronger it burns. When the thought is one of faith, love, or hope, this flame warms your entire being and lights the path before you. But when the thought is rooted in fear, anger, or limitation, the fire burns in another direction, consuming peace and filling the atmosphere with unrest. Discipline of thought requires that you learn how to withdraw the fuel of attention from every idea that does not serve you. It is not enough to recognize a destructive thought. You must refuse to feed it. For every time you rehearse your worry, replay your resentment, or magnify your doubt, you are pouring energy into a seed that will grow into experience. This is not a call to struggle with your thoughts, because struggle only tightens their hold. If you try to fight a negative thought directly, you end up wrestling with it. And in that wrestling you give it more attention, more energy, more power. The discipline is to simply let it pass by without engagement. Picture a cloud drifting across the sky. You do not try to push it away with your hands. You simply watch as it moves and know that it will soon be gone. In the same way, when a destructive idea arises, do not wrestle with it. For to wrestle is to feed it. Withdraw your focus. Place your attention on something higher, something more worthy. What you refuse to feed will eventually lose all strength and fade. The mind cannot cling to what the heart no longer entertains. Consider how often people replay insults or offenses long after they were spoken. Hours, days, even years later, they still feed those words by keeping them alive in thought. Each repetition adds energy until the wound seems deeper than it ever truly was. But the same power that magnifies pain can magnify joy if redirected. If you can replay resentment, you can replay gratitude. If you can magnify fear, you can magnify faith. The power lies not in the content of the thought, but in the attention you give it. Refusing to feed the negative is not suppression, but liberation, for it frees you from being enslaved by unworthy patterns. It creates space for new life to grow. This discipline requires vigilance, for the mind often wants to return to what is familiar. Fear feels natural when it has been rehearsed for years. Doubt seems realistic when it has been repeated 1,000 times. But once you see the pattern, you no longer have to continue it. The moment you notice yourself feeding the negative, you can choose again. It is like taking away water from a weed. At first, the weed may look strong, its roots deep, but without nourishment it cannot last. Slowly, it withers, and the garden makes space for something beautiful to grow. Your refusal to feed the negative is an act of faith, a declaration that you no longer allow destructive thoughts to dominate the soil of your imagination. Yet nature does not tolerate emptiness. When you remove something, something else will take its place. If you take away a weed and leave the ground bare, another weed may soon sprout. The same is true of the mind. You cannot simply stop thinking a thought and expect the mind to remain blank. The mind demands occupation, and if you do not provide a worthy substitute, the old thought may return or another like it will take its place. This is why the law of substitution is so powerful. It teaches you not only to remove what is destructive, but to deliberately plant what is constructive in its place. The law of substitution works in every area of life. If a thought of fear rises, you cannot simply say, "I will not fear," and then remain empty. You must replace the fear with a vision of courage, safety, or faith. If a thought of criticism appears, you cannot only try to silence it, you must substitute it with compassion or understanding. In this way, the energy of your mind is not left idle, but directed toward what serves your highest purpose. Just as a gardener removes the weed and plants a flower in its place, so must you remove the destructive thought and plant a noble one. Over time, The new thought grows stronger, its roots sinking deep, until it becomes the natural pattern of your mind. Substitution is not pretending that problems do not exist. It is choosing not to dwell on what drags you downward, but to fix your gaze on what lifts you upward. When you worry about lack, substitute that image with one of abundance, seeing yourself already supplied with everything you need. When you imagine failure, substitute it with the picture of success already achieved, feeling the confidence that comes with accomplishment. When you dwell on sickness, substitute it with the vision of health, vitality, and strength flowing through you. The mind cannot hold two images with equal strength at the same time. One must dominate. The law of substitution is the art of ensuring that the noble image takes the throne. This practice requires imagination, for substitution is not simply words but pictures. The mind responds to imagery with far greater power than to empty denials. If you deny fear but continue to picture yourself defeated, the denial has no effect. But if you deliberately create a new image of yourself standing in victory, holding your head high, feeling the reality of triumph, that image begins to replace the old pattern. The subconscious accepts the picture you persist in entertaining, whether it is born of fear or faith. Substitution gives you the power to direct what picture you will hold until it becomes reality. At first, substitution may feel like effort, because the old patterns are deeply ingrained. A thought of worry may appear, and you must deliberately call to mind a picture of peace. A thought of resentment may arise, and you must choose to imagine compassion instead. But as with any practice, the more you repeat it, the more natural it becomes. Over time, the higher thought is the one that arises first. Where once fear dominated, now faith becomes automatic. Where once anger filled your mind, now understanding takes its place. The discipline of substitution transforms the very nature of your inner world. When combined with the refusal to feed the negative, substitution becomes an unstoppable force. You withdraw energy from the destructive and immediately redirect it into the constructive. You starve the weeds while nourishing the flowers. You dismantle the patterns that held you captive while building new patterns that set you free. Life itself begins to mirror this change, for outer events are shaped by the inner images you continually hold. Circumstances bend to the vision that dominates your mind. And because you are no longer feeding what drags you down, but continually substituting it with what lifts you higher, your world begins to align with the noblest seeds you have planted. Undisciplined thought has a way of wandering between what is and what might go wrong. It drifts into worry about tomorrow, rehearses fears from yesterday, and seldom stands firm in the vision of what is desired. This wandering is the reason so many remain caught in cycles. They long to escape to live from the end means to hold in imagination the picture of your desire already fulfilled, and to assume that state so completely that it feels as real as the ground beneath your feet. It is not hoping that one day it may happen, but experiencing it in the present moment as though it already has. This shift in thought is not small, for it moves the mind from longing to possession, from lack to fulfillment, from waiting to receiving. Imagine a playwright who writes the final act of a play before the beginning is even staged. He already knows how the story concludes, and every scene that follows is written in harmony with that ending. In the same way, when you live from the end, you have already determined the conclusion in the theater of your imagination. You know the outcome, you feel its reality, and every thought thereafter is aligned with that certainty. The outer world may not yet reflect it, but within you, the victory is already won. This mental position is the foundation of disciplined thought, because it prevents the mind from wandering back into fear and doubt. When you live from the end, you no longer ask when or how your desire will come. The moment those questions arise, you remind yourself that the end has already been accomplished in consciousness. You walk, speak, and act as though it were done, because to your inner world, it is. This is not daydreaming, for daydreams lack conviction. This is assumption, clothed with the feeling of reality, so strong that the subconscious mind accepts it as fact and moves all of life to bring it forth. Living from the end is the discipline of faith and action, the refusal to be swayed by appearances, and the continual choosing of fulfillment over lack. To practice this, close your eyes and step into the scene of your desire fulfilled. Do not see yourself striving for it, but already possessing it. If it is success, feel the satisfaction of the achievement. Hear the congratulations spoken to you. Sense the relief of completion. If it is health, feel the vitality coursing through your body. Picture yourself moving freely. Imagine the joy of strength and freedom. If it is love, see the warmth of companionship. Feel the embrace. Hear the laughter that flows from connection. Hold the scene until it feels natural, until it carries the weight of reality. Each time you do this, you are disciplining your mind to live not in longing but in possession, not in hope but in certainty. This practice transforms more than thoughts. It transforms actions. When you live from the end, you begin to move differently in the world. Decisions are made with confidence because you know where you are heading. Doubts that once held you back no longer carry the same force, for you already know the story's conclusion. Your outer life begins to align with the inner conviction, often in ways you could not have planned. People, opportunities, and events appear as though drawn to the vision you hold, because your disciplined mind has set in motion the law of assumption. Living from the end is not simply thinking positively. It is thinking with authority, planting your flag in the territory of your desire and refusing to move. Yet it is not enough to hold the end once and then forget it. A single thought may pass like a fleeting breeze, but repeated thoughts engrave themselves into the subconscious mind. The subconscious accepts what is repeated, whether true or false, noble or unworthy. If you tell yourself daily that you are limited, that you will never succeed, that the world is against you, those thoughts, through repetition, sink into the depths and shape your experience. But if you consistently declare that you are capable, that you are guided, that your desire is fulfilled, these thoughts to take root, and the subconscious moves all things to reflect them. This is the power of repetition, the steady discipline of holding the higher idea until it becomes the natural state of mind. Think of a path worn through a field. At first, the grass is thick, and your steps feel uncertain. But if you walk the same path again and again, the grass gives way, the soil compacts, and a clear road is formed. In the same way, each time you repeat a thought, you press it deeper into the soil of your subconscious. The first attempt may feel strange, even unbelievable, but repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity becomes belief. Soon, what once felt forced becomes natural, and the mind embraces it as truth. This is why repetition is so vital to discipline, for it is the process by which chosen thoughts transform into convictions. Consider how easily repeated negative thoughts shape a person's life. One who constantly says "I am unlucky" soon begins to experience life in ways that confirm that statement. Another who repeats "I am always anxious" finds the feeling of anxiety present in every situation. The words and images we repeat become scripts that the subconscious performs without question. If this is true for destructive repetition, it is equally true for constructive repetition. By repeating the vision of your desire, by affirming it with feeling, by holding it in imagination until it is second nature, you create a new script for life to follow. The discipline lies in choosing what you will repeat, knowing that repetition carves destiny. Repetition is not mechanical, for lifeless words repeated without feeling leave little impression. When you affirm abundance, feel the relief of supply already present. When you affirm health, feel the joy of energy flowing through you. When you affirm love, feel the warmth of connection already yours. The subconscious responds to feeling more than words, and repetition with emotion engraves the image deep within. This is why discipline is required, for the mind often drifts back to old grooves. But with persistence, the new thought becomes the dominant one, and the old withers away. Through repetition, belief is born, and once belief is established, life reshapes itself to match it. Belief is not formed in an instant, but through continual exposure. Just as water dripping on a stone eventually leaves its mark, the disciplined mind knows this and willingly repeats the higher thought, even when appearances suggest otherwise. It knows that every repetition is a step closer to conviction, and conviction is the force that bends reality. Living from the end gives you the picture, and repetition makes it permanent. Together, they form the twin disciplines that transform imagination into experience. There is a power that is found not in noise or argument, but in silence. Most people spend their days reacting to the world around them, explaining themselves, defending their position, or pleading with life to change. Yet the true discipline of thought is not exercised in outward speech, but in inward authority. When you withdraw into the stillness of your mind and declare the state you wish to live from, you are speaking to the only power that truly governs your world. Outer circumstances may appear immovable, but they are merely shadows of inner assumptions. When you enter the silence and assume the feeling of your desire fulfilled, you plant the seed in the deepest soil of consciousness. That seed, once impressed, must bring forth its likeness, for the silence of conviction carries greater weight than the loudest words spoken in fear. This silence is not passive. It is charged with certainty. It is not the quiet of emptiness but the stillness of a mountain unmoved by the winds. When you learn to rest in this inner silence, you discover that you do not need to argue with conditions or convince anyone of your worth. You do not beg life to give you what you want, for in the silence you assume you already have it. The disciplined mind understands that assumption is possession. By repeatedly entering the stillness and rehearsing the end in imagination, clothed with the feeling of reality, you align the unseen forces of life to bring it forth. It is in this quiet chamber of thought where destinies are shaped, not in the clamor of outward effort. Many people seek to change the outer world through constant action, yet without first disciplining the inner silence. Their efforts scatter like seeds thrown on hard ground. They work harder and harder, yet meet the same obstacles, because the subconscious has not accepted the new pattern. But one who knows the art of silence works differently. Instead of exhausting themselves in worry or force, they retreat within, assume the end, and rest in the certainty of its completion. From this state, action flows naturally, decisions align effortlessly, and opportunities present themselves without strain. Silence becomes the wellspring of power, the place where the invisible is shaped before it becomes visible. Learning to master this silence takes practice, for the mind is restless by habit. The moment you close your eyes, thoughts rush in, demanding attention. But through persistence, you train the mind to obey, to quiet itself, and to focus on the image you choose. At first, this may feel like effort, but soon it becomes the most natural state, a sanctuary where you commune with your deeper self. In this silence, every assumption becomes a decree, and every decree is honored by the subconscious. This is why it is said that the disciplined mind does not shout but whispers, for whispers in the silence reach further than cries in the noise. From this inner mastery rises a profound freedom, for when you discipline your thoughts, you discover that nothing outside of you holds sway over your destiny. Outer events may seem powerful, but they are only mirrors of inner states. Once you grasp this truth, you no longer live as a victim of circumstance. You become the author of your experience, shaping life by the authority of disciplined thought. This freedom is not found in escaping responsibility, but in embracing it, for you realize that your inner world is the workshop of your future. To master your thoughts is to master your world. The restless, undisciplined mind creates confusion, conflict, and repetition of the past. But the disciplined mind, trained to hold a vision and reject the unworthy, creates order and harmony. This mastery does not come overnight, but through continual practice of awareness, substitution, repetition, and silence. Each step strengthens the next until the mind is no longer a battlefield, but a kingdom ruled by certainty. The freedom you gain is not fragile, for it rests upon the unshakable foundation of inner authority. As you grow in this mastery, life ceases to appear random. Events that once seemed accidental reveal themselves as natural outcomes of the states you have entertained within. What once looked like chance is seen as the law at work, bringing forth in the outer world what was first planted in imagination. This realization deepens your freedom, for you now understand that you are never at the mercy of appearances. This freedom is unlike any other, because it cannot be taken by force or circumstance. It is the freedom to choose what you dwell upon, to select the vision that dominates your inner world, and to persist in it until it becomes flesh. Nations may change, conditions may shift, people may come and go, but the disciplined mind remains sovereign. It carries its authority within, and from that authority flows peace, confidence, and the quiet assurance that life will always mirror the inner vision. The journey into this mastery is not about striving for control over every passing thought, but about learning which thoughts to keep and which to release. It is about refusing to be enslaved by the old patterns, and choosing instead to live from the higher idea. With each choice, the chains of habit fall away, and the freedom of conscious creation expands. This is the destiny of every person who learns the discipline of thought, to live no longer as a prisoner of fear or doubt, but as a creator, who shapes life according to the image held within.